So, based off and kind of building on Tuckerman's model or five-stage model of group formation, we're going to start talking a little bit more about the elements or structures of those interrelationships within an organization. So, the composition of a team, the roles within a team, the norms within the team, the status within a team, and the cohesion within a team. And again, what's been generally found by research is that proper composition usually results to better performance. Clearly defined roles and norms that are agreed upon by the group usually result in higher performance. The status is something that we need to look at if we're worried about problems within an organization. And again, broadly speaking, we see positive impacts and positive outcomes when we see a more cohesive team. So we want to look at each one of those in turn, and that's what we're going to be looking at in this particular module. So the composition of the team is basically creating a team in the first place, the ability of the team members, including skills, abilities, experiences, and personal characteristics. So for instance, I kind of referred to earlier that I do a lot of work on kind of constructed teams that are working with individual clients. And generally speaking, what we're providing is some form of either coaching, development, or assessment process. So generally there's going to be some clear team skills that are necessary. One, there needs to be someone on the team that actually understands the technology involved, how to integrate platforms, our assessments, our online assessments, how those integrate within the company's assessments and possibly their workday or their in systems. So that's going to be one of the skills that needs to be in that team. There needs to be someone that's really good at client management and potentially upselling additional services. So there needs to be someone with a really strong focus on sales. There needs to be a project manager, someone that's really good at keeping track of timelines, when things need to be done, and what the deliverables are. And there generally is also going to be someone that is actually doing the kind of industrial organizational work, so creating the assessments, creating the interviews, or creating the interventions. That's at a bare minimum. So that kind of gives you an idea of a composition of that particular team. If that team is also doing something that's a little non-standard and requires a deeper technical dive, we might need someone from IT. We might need additional consultants if there's multiple projects that need to be done within the larger or the smaller or the bigger project. Also, let's say that it's actually a coaching type of situation where we're doing developmental coaching of high level executives. At that point, we also might need to bring in people that are actually experienced in providing those coaching sessions. So whenever we're creating a team, one of the things we want to think about is what is the composition necessary? What skills, ability, and experiences, or possibly even personality characteristics really need to be thought of when we create the team? So when we're thinking about this, who would you want in a team? So do you want someone with conflict resolution skills, especially in a potential leadership role? Do you want collaborative problem solving skills? Do you want communication skills? Do you want goal setting and performance management skills? Do you want planning and task coordination skills? All of these are important, and of course the easy answer would be, well, just everyone on the team should have all of these skills. That would help, but also some of them may not need to be across all team members. We probably want everyone to have some form of communication skills, but there's probably going to be someone that has more of an expertise in communication, communicating with others and communicating outside of the team. We probably want everyone to have at least some collaboration skills, but there's probably also going to be someone that we want to make sure, especially if they're in a leadership role, that they know how to actually be collaborative and utilize the strengths of a team. Same with conflict resolution. As far as goal setting and performance management skills, again, we'd like to see that probably across everyone. But again, that idea of a project manager who's really in charge of keeping the team on task. By actually trying to get together a team with different skills, abilities, experiences, you usually build a much more interdependent and successful team. So the next thing we can look at is the roles within the team. And when we look at roles, we're looking at the typical behaviors that characterize a person in a specific social contact. So again, we're looking at what is the role of each person. Is the role project management? Is the role sales? Is the role client interaction? Is the role technical expertise? The role incumbent is a person in a particular role or position. So once we've defined a role, the role incumbent is the person that actually takes on that role. The role expectations is the behaviors expected of someone in that role. So ideally, we want to identify what are the key roles that need to be in a particular team. We need to identify people to take on those roles, and then we need to make clear within the team what the expectations are of someone that is in that role. When we have an issue with that, we often have a problem with role ambiguity, confusion of not knowing what one is expected to do as the holder of the role. And again, we can think about how organizations can basically design these roles to help get rid of that problem. So when we find a team that is suffering, this is one of the first things we often want to ask. Are the roles clear? Are the expectations clear? And are the right people in those roles? And a part of that will generally, if that is true, the roles are clearly defined, the expectations are clearly defined, and the people are well suited for their roles, we're probably not going to find role ambiguity. But if any of those or multiples of those are missing, we'd be more likely to be seeing confusion and that role ambiguity, which does not result, it's basically a storming phase, if you will. We're still in storming. We haven't gotten to performing. So role differentiation is different roles or role expectations that may emerge as the team develops. So we also need to recognize that what starts on paper, these are the 5 roles we need, these are the 5 people we are wanting to take on those roles, and here's the expectations of those roles. As the team progresses, grows, and is actually achieving its goals, it may also need to differentiate those roles. It may need to change some of those role expectations. And so there needs to be a process for that as well. Through this process, and again in Tuckman's model, we call this the norming phase, but there is both informal and unspoken rules as well as official or spoken rules that regulate people's behaviors. Usually when we're talking about norms, we're more focused on the unspoken or informal rules. So what is the expectations from the group as far as ethical or unethical behavior? Is there a dress code within the group? Is there an expectation of punctuality within the group? Is there an expectation of productivity in the group? And you can kind of see how these unofficial norms can start to really change how a team functions. If you've got a very well-defined team that is also the norms or the unspoken norms are that do whatever it takes to get it done, whether it's ethical or not, come in any way that you want. We don't really care if you're here on time or not, and we're not necessarily even focused on individuals being productive. We just want to make sure the team gets its job done. That would probably be a much less pleasant team to be a member of than, again, the exact same team, but with a strong focus on we want to get things done, but we want to do it in a way that's ethical and everyone feels good about. We have a certain amount of dress code to where everyone is showing respect to everyone else in the way they dressed. When we have meetings, people are expected to show up on time and be ready for the meeting and have their materials together. And productivity is completely dependent on everyone putting in their all. That would probably be a much more pleasant team to be on. So though the formal norms that we talked about as far as setting up the roles and expectations are important, these informal norms that conform are also another area of concern. And again, if I was diagnosing a team and trying to figure out why it might have been struggling, this is probably the next thing I'd look at. If I found that there was clear norms, or I'm sorry, clear expectations of role, clear communication of roles, and the right people in those roles, but the team was still suffering, the next thing I might look at is what are the informal norms that have basically taken hold in this group, and is that where the problem lies? Anytime we're looking at any of these theories in an organizational setting, what we're really trying to do is identify a problem and then create a solution. So think of these and the various theories and the frameworks that we're talking about as ways to look at problems to identify where the problem is. So norms continued. If we're looking to change norms, we also need to know a little bit about them. So norms are more likely to be developed by explicit statements by team members. So when there is an explicit communication, and this isn't necessarily a written down policy, but if people are making a lot of unethical comments, it starts to, again, affect, it's basically that secondhand smoke concept. It affects others' beliefs and thoughts. While if everyone's making very ethical comments, that's probably what's going to be resulting in a more ethical viewpoint. Carryover behavior from past situations. So if people have been on previous teams that had poor norms, they're likely to bring those norms over to the next team. Also from the first behavior patterns that emerge. So this is really important, and this goes back to Tuckman's model. When we're in that norming phase, it probably requires a little bit of management to make sure the right norms are being formed in the group. Once those norms are formed, they're more likely to be enforced if they facilitate team survival. So basically think of this purely almost from an evolutionary viewpoint. If the norm helps the team survive, succeed, and perform, it's going to be supported. And that's why we sometimes have to look out for those unethical behaviors, because they might actually result in better performance short term, but problems long term. They simplify the behaviors expected by members. So if basically everyone understands the norms and the norms make it very easy to know what's expected, that's also going to be more likely to be enforced. And they clarify what is distinctive about the team's identity. So norms that help identify why this is an in-group versus the other groups is also going to be more likely to be supported. And norms can have a lot of impacts. Norms can impact conformity. So strong norms might result in a decrease in innovation and decision making. Good norms tend to result in better decision making, better performance, and more likely that the team will participate in OCBs. And again, this is a little more complex because OCBs are, again, or organizational citizenship behaviors. They're basically positive things that you can do in an organization that are not specifically required by your job or your role, but make the workplace a lot better. Bringing some donuts to a meeting when it's not required is an OCB. Helping out someone with a project when it's not necessarily your project, but you've got 10 minutes to spare is an OCB. So when we think about those, when we see a group that has a really good solid understanding and a good solid set of norms, we'd expect to see an increase in OCBs, but that may also mean that those OCBs are primarily only being done for the team or group and are rarely seen outside. So that's something else we need to it's a balancing act. The more you create group cohesion and solid norms within a group, you also are reinforcing our natural tendency as social creatures to do this in-grouping and out-grouping that we've talked about as well, that can be problematic longer term. So status within the group, the relative prestige, social position, or rank given to individuals or groups or individuals by others. So there's both formal status and informal status. Formal status is prestige by virtue of an official position. Includes status symbols, objects reflecting the position of the hierarchy of power. So if someone is appointed as the leader of a group team, in my case, that would be the account lead. So whoever takes on that role has formal status. Basically, they're the ones that are reporting on what the group does or the team is doing. They're the ones that are usually the first people to get feedback on positive or negative effects of the performance of the team. But that isn't always the only form of status within a group. There's also informal status, prestige of individuals with certain characteristics that are not formally recognized within this particular team. I've been doing this for the better part of 20 plus years now. I was a former full professor of psychology of industrial organizational psychology. I've worked as an external and internal consultant for multiple organizations over my career. So when I'm in any group, there's a good chance that there's not a lot of other people in the group with the same amount of experience and knowledge that I have. So even when I'm not a leader, there's a tendency for even the leader to defer to me a little bit. Is that what you think, Joel? So, and I'm not trying to brag here. I'm just saying that's a good example of informal status, that I have prestige beyond the position. Now, in my role, I often am also, that informal status is paired with formal status. And we usually find that that's going to result in the best kind of combination. If the person that is formally in charge is also recognized as the expert in the field, then they have formal and informal status. And again, just getting to that diagnostic phase, if I was being asked to help a group perform better, or I was being asked to give developmental feedback to a team to increase its productivity, this is another thing I would ask is who's actually formally in charge and who's informally in charge? Who has formal status, who has informal status? And are they getting along or are they not getting along? Because that could be a very good indicator that there's a problem that's fixable. Finally, we're going to be talking about cohesion of a group, degree to which team members decide to remain in the team and are committed to team goals. So there's many factors that influence the cohesion of a team, and this is often measured as a positive. We want to see team cohesion. Severity of the integration, or I'm sorry, initiation. This basically breaks down to how hard is it to become a member of the team and how prestigious the whole team is seen. So for instance, if you're trying to get on a after-school sports team that takes everyone, that would be an example of not a very severe initiation. If you were trying to become a Major League Baseball player, it would be a very difficult thing. And if you did get on that team, there would be a lot of prestige simply from becoming a member of that group. So that's what we're talking about, a severity of the initiation. We're not necessarily talking about a painful or psychologically unpleasant experience to join the team. It's really getting at how hard is it to join the team and how much status the team has within the organization or within the culture in general. Conditions of high external threat or competition. So obviously, if you're in a team where there is little competition and no external threat, you're probably going to see less cohesion. However, again, going back to that Major League Baseball team, there is a lot of external threat. If we don't do well, my job might be in danger, and also my entire goal is defeating other teams, highly competitive. The amount of time spent together, so the more time we spend with a team, the more cohesion we usually get. Group size is kind of inverse to this. Smaller groups tend to become cohesive quicker, larger groups tend to become cohesive slower. And again, history of success. So think about, again, that Major League Baseball example. It's probably less status and less hard to get into a team that has had a losing record for years than it is to get into a team that has a history of success. So all of these can result in success. Now, again, thinking of the levers that we want to move, if I was looking at a team that might be having some difficulty, one of the things I might ask is, how cohesive is the team? And if the team isn't cohesive, I'd start to think about, how can we increase that? For example, I'm not necessarily wanting to add competition, but I might want to ramp up the actual goals that they're expected to get. I might look at the group size and maybe make it a little smaller if it was a very large group. I might try to increase the amount of time they're spending together. And I might also try to give them a few successes to where that cohesion will increase as well. So the positive consequences that studies have found of high cohesion in a team or group is increased group member satisfaction. So the more cohesive the group is, the more people enjoy being a part of it. We also see an increase in participation in group activities, and then within an organization, that would be also an increase in the willingness to work towards the team's goals, which is the next one, the acceptance of group goals. We typically see a potentially higher productivity when we see that. And finally, we tend to see decreased absenteeism or turnover. So people want to be involved with the group, they want to be there for the meetings, they want to help out, they want to be productive, and they're less likely to leave. There are some negative consequences, though, especially when we start to find highly cohesive teams. This may be counterproductive if the group goals are contrary to the organization's goals. So we need to make sure that if it's a highly cohesive team, it is still focused on goals that the organization values. And the second negative consequence that can happen is the group starts to maybe close itself off from any information it doesn't want to hear. And this is called groupthink, and groupthink is what we're going to discuss in the next module, and the research on that and what groupthink can look like. Because this is one of those examples where not only would I be worried if the group did not have cohesion, if I was being asked to diagnose a team that was having trouble, one of the things I might ask is it too cohesive and is it fallen into groupthink? So we'll need to talk about what groupthink is and how to identify it. So that's what we'll be talking about in the next module, and I look forward to meeting you there.